Hi everyone, I'm Karen MacNeil, and this is WineSpeed.com's People to Know, insider interviews with the most fascinating and important people in the wine business. And today we have the pleasure of having Louisa Rose in the office. Louisa is head of sustainability at the Yalumba winery in the Barosa Valley of Australia, after recently retiring from her role there as chief winemaker. Louisa's first harvest with Yalumba was in 1992 as part of a project in the Enology and Viticultural program at Roseworthy, South Australia's famous winemaking school where she studied winemaking. In 1993, she was offered a job as an assistant winemaker, and she's been there ever since. Yes, Louisa, welcome.
That's a quick CV, isn't it?
Yes. Well, thank you. You did recently retire as chief winemaker to focus on sustainability. Why is sustainability important to you, and why is it important to Yalumba?
Well, Yalumba is owned by the Hill-Smith family, who are celebrating 175 years of family ownership this year. You know, I've worked for all my time at Yalumba with Robert Hill-Smith, the fifth generation, and now with his daughters Jessica and Lucy. And sustainability is just inherent in a family business. I mean, you don't get to 175 years if there's not something, inherently sustainable about you. So I think it's sort of just in our sort of DNA working there, and certainly from an environmental side, that sustainability has always been incredibly important for us. We've had ongoing environmental management projects over years and years for continuous improvement, for increasing biodiversity in our vineyards, for just doing the right thing, I think. And family businesses, of course, can do that because they can make long-term decisions for the next generation and the generation after. So it's always been, what we've been doing, and the social side of sustainability equally for a family-owned business that employs generations of other families to work for them in a small community like the Barossa. It's part of it as well. But so it's been part of what we've been doing every sort of day of our working lives. But as you would know, and I think everybody realises these days, is sustainability is becoming something that you need to be really active in. You need to actually go, it's more about than just sort of making decisions that come along. It's really being active in what are we going to do about decarbonisation? What are we going to do about our environment? And so, what was part of my winemaking role has sort of grown into a real passion and something that I'm now doing much more full time.
Yes, you're right, because of course sustainability sounds wonderful, but it is really made up of a lot of concrete practices that have to be implemented and followed through on. And I was thinking about our interview this morning and remembering how good the Yalumba Viognier is. And I love Yalumba wines across the board, but I remember that when Yalumba first started making Viognier, there were like 20 acres left in the whole world, and most of that was in Condrieu in France. It's not an easy variety to make. Bad Viognier smells like duty-free perfume. So what is it about that variety that you like, that attracted you?
Look, it's interesting. I try not to sort of put a sort of a lens over and make it all that sort of romantic. It was a variety that we had when I started at Yalumba. It had been planted in 1980, and having been through, as you said, one of the the great wine schools of the world, I am 99% positive that I never tasted it or heard about it until I got to Yalumba. So you're right, it was that rare. And I think the difficult thing, if you like, is not actually growing it. It's understanding that it behaves so differently to other white varieties. So, we were, as an Australian wine industry, used to, in the Barossa particularly, used to making Riesling and Semillon. Chardonnay even then was relatively new for us. And if you try to make Viognier like you make a Riesling, you make a very, very unattractive wine, as you've just mentioned, or even worse, you make a wine with absolutely no flavour and no acidity, and it's just bland. So it was really understanding the beauty of Viognier in the vineyard, how it behaves in the vineyard, what it likes, the way it likes to be grown, and then it was this sort of journey through. For us, really understanding the beautiful, healthy, natural yeasts that we had in our vineyards, all just there happily growing because we had such healthy biodiversity generally in our vineyards. That we we found that those yeasts were the way to sort of, round out the edges, make the wines less awkward, give them better longevity and more texture, and it was sort of like a match made in heaven. So when people say to me, Viognier is difficult to make, I go, well, it's not really, but you just need to understand it. And then once you understand it, it's like, like all things.
I think I know some people like that, actually.
But you need to understand, yes.
Yes. Well, Yalumba is quite old, as you mentioned, 175 years old. It was started in the 1840s. Does that ever, weigh on you? Do you ever feel like, wow, that's a big legacy that I have to honor, to carry the responsibility for?
Maybe not that way, but one of the things about Yalumba is very much that there are people that you work with that have been there for a long time. I'm up to nearly sort of 32 years, and I'm nowhere near am I the newest kid on the block. I remember a man called Peter Wall who was there for a long time, and I worked with him for a long time. He had been the chief winemaker and was production director when I started, and he and I used to talk about wine science and all that sort of thing, but we also really shared a love of history. And Peter used to tell me stories about wines and about a man called Rudy Kronberger, who was a winemaker that Peter overlapped with. When Peter started in the 70s, Rudy finished in the 70s, having started in 1928 when he came out from Austria as a winemaker. So in some ways it's a long time, and maybe it's a heavy, but in some ways I feel like I almost knew Rudy because I was only one person removed from him, and I can tell his stories, and so I think it's that if you just came into it cold and you had none of that support and none of that history to give you confidence going forward, it might be a bit daunting. But I think it's that amazing history that actually does, as I say, give you confidence to be able to go and continue to evolve wines and wine styles so that they're relevant for people and our foods and our occasions and all the things that we love wine for.
Beautifully said. I only learned recently about the Barosa Cellar, the idea that there's a group of you who are putting together, I believe, vintages from many different wineries in the Barossa almost as a library of them. Tell me about this project.
Yeah, so the Barosa Cellar was, the cellar itself, the concept started in 2011 when the Barons of Barossa, which is a philanthropic fraternity of Barossans, and we dress up in red robes, and it's all very colourful from time to time, but very much with the charter of preserving and promoting all things Barossa, which of course is food and wine and history and heritage and character and all those things. And we were sitting around at one of our meetings in 2011 and said, what's the next thing we could do, to raise money so we can give more money back to the community and so forth. And we decided that we would collect wines from current vintage release wines from Barossa wineries. We get them to donate it, and we knew they'd do that because Barossans are very generous. If we were ever organising a dinner or whatever it might have been for whatever festival, or if you're ringing up people and saying, can I have 12 bottles of your best wine? They say, sure, Louisa. Is that all you want? Are you sure you don't need more? Can I give you something else as well? I mean, it's that sort of generosity. So we knew we'd be able to collect these wines as current releases, and we also knew that a lot of wineries don't have the ability or the finances or the space or whatever it is to be able to sell those wines and have significant amount as mature wines. So we thought, well, we'll collect them young, we'll sell them, and then they'll be available to use to promote and to celebrate the Barossa with some maturity on them. So it sounded like a great idea. We started doing it, and in about a couple of weeks after the first letter went out, we had about 2,000 bottles of wine going, and now we need somewhere to put them.
Yeah.
So anyway, in 2020 we had built this beautiful new building. It's got an underground wine cellar, it's got an underground vault, we call it. The vault itself, which is the display area, is beautiful. And it holds just over 3,000 bottles of wine donated from over 100 different wineries, and then we've got about another 7,000 bottles sort of in the further underground in the not so salubrious area. But it's just a beautiful display, and then we've got a lovely sort of event space in front of it that the community can hold meetings in, or we can have events in. We can have tastings or dinners. We can put 100 people down a long table in the middle of it, and we've got one of the best views. It looks over the Barossa from the east of the Barossa Valley to the west. So, our aim was to to have a sort of a hub of grape and wine community. And to grow the Barossa pie. We weren't wanting to take away from anyone else, any other winery or anything else, but maybe have people come and stay another night in the Barossa or another day and come up and have a look for it. And the Barossa has absolutely embraced it. And wineries use it, other businesses use it, and it's just been amazing. So yeah, it's a great collection of these amazing wines. So we have no sort of criteria about what people can donate. We just say that, please, donate the wines that you think will, will look amazing, in 10 years plus, and by and large, that's exactly what they do. And we use them. People can book in for curated tastings or for dinners. And one of the ways we've raised money is that we have a 1 hectare vineyard on the site. So with the whole site is about 2.5 hectares. And the 1 hectare, so 1 hectare, about 2.5 acres of this land in the front. And we're sort of going, what will we do on that bare land? Well, what else? Of course, you're going to plant a vineyard, aren't you? So we decided that we would ask, and again, this is part of the Barossa community. We'd ask the owners of some of the really old vineyards in the Barossa, knowing that we are with no phylloxera, a lot of pre-phylloxera vineyards. So some of the oldest Shiraz, particularly in the world, growing in the Barossa. So we'd ask the vineyard owners, could we come and take cuttings from your vineyards? Could we propagate them? And we've got 35 rows, each row from a different one of these really old vineyards. And
that's spectacular.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a DNA sort of fingerprint of Barossa Shiraz. Yeah. And then we use that to promote the Barossa, and people can buy a vine or donate a vine, and they'll get a specific vine allocated to them, and for $1,000 Australian dollars they sort of have a little piece of the Barossa, they get a certificate, and then they have all sorts of other sort of things that they're available, special things that only vine owners can come to, events and tastings and things. So
fabulous.
It is fabulous, and it's just we've got these people now that just sort of, they come back to the Barossa regularly to see their vine and to come and taste some more wine and bring their friends, and so it's really starting to achieve exactly what we wanted it to be. So
the cooperation and the generosity of the wine business in general, and when you talk about a farming community, an old farming community like Barossa, it's remarkable. People think of these businesses as being in competition with each other, and of course to some extent they are, but that is very much outweighed sometimes by the cooperation, especially in farming communities. Yeah.
It is, and we have it in spades in the Barossa. It's an amazing community to be part of. I mean, I didn't grow up in the Barossa. I wasn't there until I started at Yalumba, but I feel so much a part of it now, and it's my home. I might not have been there for 6 generations like many of my friends, but certainly it is a great wine community, and you're right. And I think Australians, maybe because of our sort of distance from everywhere else, but we know that the way that we will all succeed individually if we succeed collectively.
Right.
And that's been the way that we marketed ourselves around the world. It's the way that we celebrate together and bring people into our communities. So I think it's just it's not just in Australia, but we do it well.
Yeah. Why is wine important to you?
Wine for me is, and I say to people, one of the great things, if one of our wines can become, part of people's memories, then I think we're doing a great job, because I think it's, when people enjoy wine, it goes so well with food and with people and with friends, and it's not about the wine itself. It's about the whole sort of memory that might be creating, and I think that's that sort of feels better to me than when people ask me about, well, what's the best wine you've ever had? And they go, well, I could tell you these wines which were the most expensive or whatever, but actually I'm going to tell you about the most amazing wine experience I've ever had, and where I was and what I was seeing and who I was with and what I was eating and what language the waiter was talking to me in, and that's what wine's about to me. It's that whole experience. It's not just wine for wine's sake.
That is so beautifully said. Boy, do I agree with that. A couple of other questions. I know that Yalumba is one of the only wineries, maybe the only winery left in Australia that has its own cooperage. So as a winemaker, why is making your own barrels also important to you?
having a cooperage, it's like having a candy shop for a winemaker. It's all of the variables that go into making a barrel, which I'll list off in a minute. You know, we can literally adjust those, or get our coopers to adjust those for the vintage, for the wine, right down to vineyard level. It's such it's such an amazing thing to have. And when you think about variables, it's, you know, where the oak comes from, and it doesn't come from Australia. We don't have oak, and we don't make barrels out of eucalyptus trees, but we get French. We've got Hungarian. We use American oak, and then the size of the barrel, which gives you, you know, obviously the different surface to volume ratio, different amount of air that's going to get in for the volume of wine. We make 100 litre barrels, which we call Yalumba octaves. We have barriques, the 225 traditional style. We also make hogsheads for 300 litres, so that's going to change it. Then how you bend those staves from the straight staves, you know, to the barrel shape. You know, whether you put them over a fire and spray them with water to fill them with steam, or whether you submerge it into a hot tub, as we say, into hot water and immersion bend it, that's going to change the characteristics of the wood. And then obviously the toasting itself. How hot the fire is, how long it toasts for, the colour of the wood goes, how much caramelisation or not you get in your oak. So all those things you literally fine-tune, and it's such a fun thing. And I'm not trying to take away anything about all of the amazing cooperages that there are around the world, because they are. But to have, you know, and specifically for the Yalumba, you know, premium red wines, which is really where we love using these. It's a real joy to have.
So the process, though, of how that works, I mean, do you have a wine and then you say to yourself, you know, given the character of this wine, a barrel that was like X would be really good, and then you make the barrel? Is that how it works?
Yes, but but it doesn't sort of start from nothing. Of course, you've got experience, and for us, we've been working with most of the vineyards that we use for a very long time, so we know the styles of wine, and we know the way that oak will. So it's more of a gradual evolution rather than a hard decision. But then we do, you know, as we do with all of our things, we do a lot of, you know, a lot of trials, as we did with the early days of Viognier. I mean, it was all trials and things like that. And then when something really works, then we start to integrate that into our winemaking, you know, in a larger and larger scale. And of course, at the same time, you're evolving as people's tastes change, and you're so. You know, we don't use nearly as much new oak now as we did 30 years ago, because that's just the style of the way that wine's changed. And, you know, I think around the world, people are using less oak.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it any less important, but it makes it, you know, in fact, even possibly a bit more important, because you actually want it to be subtle and really in tune with the wine, rather than sort of being a really big part of the wine.
Right. You are such a renowned winemaker, one of the most famous in Australia. What character trait do you think you possess that has led to your success?
I don't know. What character trait? Maybe it's persistence.
Persistence. Sounds about right. Yeah.
Patience, I think. I think patience is really important in wine. You know, whether it's, you know, when people taste a wine, it might not be the first time they taste it that they get it, or, you know, the first time you tell somebody a story that, you know, they forget it. And I know with Viognier, I mean, I know how many times I've sort of told the Viognier story, and then occasionally I sort of think, surely I've spoken to everybody in the world now about this. And then you realise that there's a whole new generation of people out there, and so, you know, but it doesn't make it any less relevant. It just makes it, so I think patience is probably a good one.
All right. And yes, patience we all need as much of as we can possibly get. And last question, what would most people be surprised to learn about you?
I don't know. They might be surprised to learn that I'm a part-time farmer. My husband and I have a farm that we love growing animals on and growing vegetables, and we plant trees, and we sit down sometimes at night, and often it's just things that have come off our property that's on the plate in front of us, and we know somebody's fingers that have been in the wine. And
Fantastic. That is beautiful.
I'm a pretty simple person really at heart.
Well, thank you, Louisa. And for our complete interview with Louisa Rose, go to People to Know on the Wine Speed site.